Kenzey C. Cooper, and the C stands for cute.
Oh my god, and not Brianna Dobbs. We're just going to be giving you a little background information on the Underground Railroad.
That way you know what kind of went on more in detail throughout the film.
Underground Railroad's earliest escape attempts were made by individual slaves and were not organized in any format at all. These escapes, however, formed the paths and trails that led to the Underground Railroad. Other slaves, free blacks, and white abolitionists moved escaping slaves along the railroad routes. Free blacks risked the most by their involvement with the Underground Railroad, namely their freedom and their lives. Slaves, although they could not read, write, or often knew the layout of the land surrounding their plantation well. Slaves knew the surrounding area better than their owners. Escaped slaves were transported by sea, lake, river, canal, and rail when trains came into being. Most of the Underground Railroad routes traveled north, following the North Star, eventually ending in Canada. Some of the routes ended southwards in Mexico.
Harriet Tubman was born into slavery in 1820 near Bucktown, Maryland. She completed 19 missions plus her own and collaborated with Thomas Garrett and William Still on at least 8 missions. She helped more than 300 slaves escape, including her parents and her siblings. She worked for the Union Army as a scout, and all her ancestors were brought to America from Africa in shackles. Yes, shackles, the things that go on your ankles, yeah. Her birth name is actually Arminta, but her nickname was Minty. Minty. She started working as a real slave at age 5 and married a free man named John Tubman at age 25, which is where the name Tubman came from. And she started calling herself Harriet Tubman when she got into her adult ages, you know, because she didn't like the other name. So that's where Harriet Tubman comes from. And she ran away in 1849 alone on foot in the middle of the night and followed the North Star to Pennsylvania. And that was her first trip to becoming a free slave. And she died in 1913 in Auburn, New York. Although Harriet Tubman was a big help during the Underground Railroad, there were a lot of people that helped out, and one of which was Thomas Garrett. He was born on August 21st, 1789 in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. He was said to have helped free over 2,700 slaves to escape. He had a 40-year-long career and was known as a station master, and a lot of the white abolition leader people were known as Quakers. And as a child, his family housed runaway slaves in their Delaware farmhouse. And so you could say he had a safe house as a child. And during his career, he was fined for $5,400 for knowingly harboring fugitives and had a trial in 1848. Which he had a lot of lawyers help him with that, because a lot of the lawyers back then believed in helping some of the slaves.
William Still was born free in 1821 Indiana Mills, New Jersey. He was an entrepreneur with very little formal education. He volunteered for the Union Army in 1865. He published his encounters with slaves and accounts in 1872. He campaigned to end segregation on Philadelphia trolley cars in 1867. Another
one of the helpers in this was a guy named Samuel D. Burris. I think I'm saying that right, not really sure. But he was born a free black man in Willow Grove, Delaware in 1808. He conducted the runaways on the URR through Delaware's free black communities. He was nearly sold into slavery September of 1848, but he wasn't, gladly. And he sadly died in San Francisco, California in 1869.
John Hunn, a Quaker abolitionist, was an Underground Railroad station master. He partnered with Thomas Garrett to aid escapes and make their way through Delaware. He got tried and fined in 1848 with Garrett for helping the Hawkins family escape, a black family. Safe houses offered shelter and nourishment along the route, but were changed often to avoid detection. Agents, conductors, and station managers provided shelter, food, money, directions, means of transportation, and clothes. Often, slaves escaped in disguise. Men wore women's clothing, and women wore men's clothing. Light-skinned blacks
Like me.
Dressed up as upper-class citizens traveling with their entourage of slaves, created labels, buy goods, and concealed runaways and slaves. They were hidden in secret spaces and homes, in secret compartments and wagons, in the hull of boats. They hid day by day, traveling under the darkness of night. They swam rivers, crossed frozen rivers on foot and on horseback, and walked tremendous distances. They slept in barns and fields and woods and were hunted down by slave and bounty hunters with their tracking hounds.
So now that we got all our information out to everyone, don't you think we should go interview other people and see how much they know?
Yes I do.
Alright. Shoo.
What was the Underground Railroad?
It was like a pathway to help all the people get to safe place.
What people?
Black people.
Who was famous for running the Underground Railroad?
Harriet Tubman and a lot of people that were under her that she helped the rest of them.
How did the slaves on the railroad recognize the safe houses?
Good question, I don't know.
So who ran the Underground Railroad?
It wasn't really, well, it was ran by slaves or freemen, you know, and then Harriet Tubman, you know, and they had a little system and they had some Caucasian helpers, you know, along the way.
Who was the main person?
Harriet Tubman.
How did the slaves know what was a safe house?
They had a lantern or a candle in the window, but sometimes it was false because they could trap them by luring them in with fake candles and stuff too, so you gotta watch out if you was a slave back then. So.
What was the Underground Railroad?
It was a system for slaves to be transported from the south into the north safely.
Okay, who ran the Underground Railroad?
Former slaves, white people, some people who are against abolitionists, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So how did the slaves on the railroad know that the house was a safe house?
Say it one more time.
How did the slaves know that it was a safe house?
How did they know it was a safe house? I guess some of the slaves had, like they had like little signs or whatever, like a light in the window, or some kind of signal that'll tell you that they're safe.
What was the Underground Railroad?
The Underground Railroad was a train underground that transported slaves.
Who was the leader of the Underground Railroad?
Harriet Tubman.
How did the slaves know it was a safe house?
There were signs on top of the houses that said safe house.
What is the Underground Railroad?
The Underground Railroad was a network of people that left the South and moved up to the northern borders of the northern states, trying to get away from slavery.
Who was the leader of the Underground Railroad?
It was actually not a real leader. Harriet Tubman, actually, she only participated, I think she had 13 trips, and she helped about 70 people out of the 100,000 estimated.
And how did the slaves know it was a safe house?
They had a safe house banner. No, I'm just kidding. They had a lantern that they would put out on like the post or something that would.
Okay, do you think that the Underground Railroad interviews were successful today?
I think the ones that we got were pretty successful, besides the fact that a lot of people didn't know some of the information. So like they knew to a certain extent, but not like fully. And other than that, I think they were pretty successful. So do you think, in your opinion, that African Americans have a better understanding on the Underground Railroad?
I do. I feel like they're closer to the subject. You know, from a young age, they're taught in their homes about it and stuff.
What was the Underground Railroad?
Well, you know, hold on, let me cut on that.
What was the Underground Railroad? What was the Underground Railroad?
Again.
What was the Underground Railroad?
The Gospel Train, or better known as the John Hunn, a Quaker abolitionist, was an underground stay around train.